sounds like a stupid question.
Probably is, because, yeah, go ahead. Skilled managers equals high morale, which equals all that cool stuff that you cannot pay for and you can't punish for.
When you close off that feedback channel, you are not going to be able to hear the truth.
In the first microseconds, your brain can't tell the difference between physical danger and what we call social danger.
I'm pissed off at you.
Me, specifically?
Well, just because you're my boss and all.
Employees tend to get promoted until they reach their level of incompetence. Go forward and don't suck.
Alrighty, folks. We are back for another episode of the Managing with Mind and Heart podcast, and we are excited to be here today because this is going to be a cool episode. My name is Ethan Nash with Nash Consulting, and here across from me is
Michael Nash with Nash Consulting. Hey, everybody.
Today, we are talking about this big topic called autonomy. It's a topic that a lot of teams and workplaces talk about. And what we find is they talk about it and often have a difficult time putting autonomy into practice. So we're going to cover that today. Mike, why don't you start off by just telling us a little bit about autonomy? Like, why is autonomy important for us? Like, why do humans crave autonomy if they do?
Yeah, we do. We have the top 15 management skills that we've talked about, of course, on this podcast many, many times. And one of those items is provide autonomy and trust, or give autonomy and trust. And it's probably one of the more researched components of organizational life and motivating employees to produce and to bring their best self. There's just so much research around this. We've also, of course, talked about the SCARF model, those 5 domains that we're always looking for, but we're also kind of watching out for threats to, right? And the SCARF model, of course, was status, certainty, autonomy, which we're talking about today, relatedness, and fairness. You just can't get away from this idea that human beings not only are more likely to thrive and bring their best when they have a sense of control and a sense of autonomy, but also tend to shut down, right? And withdraw and have a really hard time bringing their best self when they feel micromanaged or over-controlled, or they don't have a sense of personal freedom. I mean, Ethan, I don't know if it's fair to ask you that, but can you identify times in your life where you have felt over-controlled, and how you feel about that, how you felt during those times? And can I remind you that I am your father and you are my son, and you could really go into some childhood stuff here if you wanted to. And you know what? Feel free.
Oh, wow. Well, the floodgates just opened, and that's by your doing.
Yep.
No, I mean, yeah, I can think of situations on both sides of the spectrum here where things felt overly controlled, or in situations in which I felt like I had a ton of control over my approach to the work I was doing. I had a job early part of my career, and it was pretty dang controlled. Now, I was right out of college, and so I didn't necessarily think about that I didn't have a lack of autonomy at this point and what was doing to my motivation. But it was everything from, you show up at this time every day, you do this type of work between 8 and 10:30 every day, and you take lunch at this time. I remember at one point I took an hour and a half lunch for a few days in a row, because I was using that time to also go to the gym, have lunch, go to the gym. But I was showing up work a little bit earlier, staying a little bit late, right? And I figured, well, I'm putting the same amount of time that's expected. And I remember just having a conversation with the boss of just like, no, that you can't do that. Like, you show up at this time, you take an hour lunch, and that's it, right? And this is a salaried position, by the way, right? So, right. It is situations like that I look back at and go, those were key moments in which I just lost interest in that job, right? And I kind of felt like I was coming in, going through the motions, right? So there's this sense of, I don't care, right? The apathy can settle in when we just have no control over what we do.
Yeah.
So that's one of my experiences. What about you? What does it feel like for you when you feel like you've been over controlled? As well as what does it feel like when you feel like you have the freedom to make some choices and and feel like you're trusted to make good choices?
It's interesting because I've been reading the research on how much this matters, and of course we've been teaching on this, and I've been reading about SCARF, and I've been processing what you just asked me recently because I knew this podcast was coming up, and I really feel it. Like I really can identify those times in my life where I have felt controlled, when I felt that I really didn't have a lot of choices, and maybe because I didn't have enough psychological safety to speak out, I just kind of did what I was, what I thought was needed or what I thought was expected, or because I literally was not given choices. And I really do start to feel sometimes, frankly, almost depressed a little bit. It turns down my mood. I start to feel a little oppressed as well. I just, that feeling of being boxed in just makes my perspective on life not so energetic, and I don't feel so great about going through my day. I notice it pretty clearly. And I notice the opposite too. I feel like when I'm trusted, that feels like such I feel so respected. I want to kind of rise to the occasion. I get more creative. I get more, I feel more accountable. Right. Which is like, okay, I can't just do whatever because I'm going to have to deal with the consequences because I'm in charge here. Right. So I really feel it. And it's really helped me even the last few days to think about how important it is to solve for this, to really find ways to give autonomy to employees.
Like you said, there's a lot of, they've really looked into this factor we're calling autonomy. There's a lot of research and study out there, but it is, what psychologists call, right, an intrinsic motivation factor, right? So there's extrinsic and there's intrinsic factors, right? Extrinsic being things external to ourselves, things like maybe money, fame, right? On an evolutionary level, extrinsic factors translate into things like food, shelter, status, access to resources, access to mates, right? So we are actually wired to want these extrinsic factors, right? But what they actually find is that in this day and age, once our basic human needs are being met, intrinsic factors then take center stage for our motivation, right? Meaning there is just a need, an innate need for us to steer our own ship. Autonomy turns us into much more effective versions of ourselves because we want that control in our life. And so if you think of it that way, that the intrinsic factors are more motivating for people once their human needs are being met, we start to realize, okay, this is a big deal that we need to put a focus on. Now, I know that you've been looking at some research just around autonomy in general.